In this video, we're going to be covering the different postures available to you for a meditation practice. In the book, it's just past the Japa Mantra example section, right here. So finding a comfortable position for your meditation practice is a very important part of the practice itself. Comfort means less distractions from the body and therefore less distractions that you have to deal with during your meditation practice. There isn't a specific posture that any person has to use. It's really about finding comfortability, not having an image of what it's supposed to look like while you're meditating, sitting in lotus position, with your hands like this and everything super stoic. It's about what's comfortable for you and your body. There are, however, postures traditionally that are believed to cultivate a greater circulation of prana, which is vital life force, throughout the body. It is not necessary to use these postures, of course, but I think it's important to explore them nonetheless on your own time. And, some of these won't be accessible to some people, but there are different exercises and things that I will show you in another video that will help you open up into the hips and find greater comfortability in these different seated floor postures. So again, like I said here, the perfect position for you is one that enhances your practice, not hinders it. Explore different postures and learn for yourself what feels best for you right now. And for any seated posture, it is recommended to use a meditation cushion. There are reasons. The raising of the hips is the main focus to use a meditation cushion, because raising the hips allows them to roll slightly forward, and in doing so, it supports the natural curve of your low back. And once your spine is aligned, the rest of your body follows naturally. I'll just show you a side view sitting with the meditation cushion. You don't need one this large. There's also some that are smaller of this nature, and you can also use a bolster. It doesn't have to be a meditation cushion. Anything you have lying around that will help raise your hips up. So as you can see, seated here, it lifts my hips up higher than the knees, typically, and then it supports the natural curve of my low back, and it helps you facilitate a long, tall spine, which is very necessary for a good meditation practice. Hunched over like this, it doesn't produce a good feeling in the body. It's overall going to hurt your physical practice. So with the assistance of a meditation cushion, raise those hips, get that long, tall spine, and, over a certain amount of time, sitting like this becomes very comfortable. So now we'll move on to a demonstration of each of the postures outlined in the book, starting with easy pose or sukhasana. It's definitely a common pose that most people have experienced before. It's essentially sitting down, cross-legged. You have the opposite foot underneath the opposite knee, and that's it. I'm sure most people have sat in this posture at some point in their life, but it's a very accessible seated posture. It does help with opening up into the hips if your hips are a little tight. So this is a very accessible and beginner position for most people. Moving on to the adept's pose or siddhasana. In this video, I'm going to go through Ardha Siddhasana because it's a much more accessible position for most people. Siddhasana, even for me, can tend to be a little uncomfortable. Typically, this one is easier with a lower meditation cushion. So how you do this pose is you pull the left foot in towards the body, sitting forward on your meditation cushion. The left heel will make contact with your perineum, which is the spot between the anus and the genitals. And then you pull your right foot in to sit right in front of the left foot, just like this. And this is Ardha Siddhasana, or half adept's pose. The full pose involves bringing this foot up, coming in contact with the pubic bone and tucking this foot under. It's a little bit advanced posture, but do feel free to look that up if you're interested. Next pose we're going to cover is hero's pose, and that is essentially just sitting on the knees, sitting back on the heels, just like this, and you would sit, hands down on the thighs, maintaining that, long, tall spine, and that's pretty much it. This can be a little uncomfortable if you haven't sat in this pose, for an extended period of time before. So a couple ways to make it more comfortable would be to put a bolster in between your butt and your heels, and this can offer some alleviation and a little alleviation from some strain that people sometimes feel when sitting directly onto their heels. Another way to do this posture would be to take either a larger bolster or a pillow, bring it between the legs. You bring your knees on either side, and then you just sit on the cushion. This one is extremely comfortable. If a hero's pose is something that you're comfortable with and looking forward to use a lot, putting a bolster in between the legs makes this very accessible, very comfortable for most people. Now we'll move on to the most iconic of meditation postures, which would be the lotus position. Again, a very advanced seated position, but I'll demonstrate it nonetheless. So lotus pose, you'd bring the left foot in to the right hip crease as far as possible, and then the opposite foot, the right foot, in to the left hip crease, and that is essentially the posture. This requires a really good amount of hip mobility and ankle flexibility. It can be really tough, especially on the ankles when first doing half lotus and stuff like that, because you're just not used to the pressure in certain areas. But this posture, it does encourage a long spine while also creating an energetic lock with the legs to circulate prana within your system. And yeah, like I said, it's definitely the most iconic meditation position, but to most people, it's not very comfortable, not very accessible. I don't meditate in this personally, but it's open to you if you would like to use it. Next, we have Shavasana, which is essentially just laying down. Just get some of the stuff out of the way. Shavasana is just laying on the floor. You can either have your knees bent or the legs straight. I don't have a lot of room at the moment, so I'll keep my legs bent. And then you can just drop the knees in if you have them bent. And then, this is easily the most comfortable position to meditate in. The only downside being that it can often be too comfortable and people tend to fall asleep while in this position. So just keep that in mind. Another way to even make this more comfortable, I'm just going to scoot back a little bit. You can bring a bolster underneath the knees, and it just raises them up, and it makes it a little bit more comfortable, and it provides a little bit of a different posture to experience. This one can be done, you can even do this in bed. I've done that before, but definitely prone to falling asleep when I do that one. Moving on to one more posture. I'm just going to cut it for a second while I bring over a chair. So if floor postures aren't that comfortable for you and it's something you're continuing to work up to, you can always use the assistance of a chair to meditate in. But a lot of the same principles apply to sitting in a chair that apply to using the floor. So you want to sit more closer to the front edge of the chair. And as you can tell, my hips right now are currently just in line with my knees. I would want to use something like a small bolster to raise my hips up slightly higher and allow that slight roll forward of the hips, supporting the low back, facilitating that long spine. Plant the feet evenly, directly underneath the knees, hips width distance. And then it's much like the seated postures from there. Just maintain that long, tall spine, hands resting where comfortable, and you're set. This is often, a very comfortable position that you can do at work. For people that getting up and down from the floor tends to be a little bit too much or a little painful, this is a very good posture for anyone with problems with the floor, or hey, maybe you don't have a lot of floor space and the only thing you got around is a chair. Chair works perfectly. I'll just get rid of this and we'll get back to the rest. So, some advice for choosing your preferred meditative position. I suggest one in which you find ease in finding that long, tall spine. So something that allows you to have, easy access to, good posture. One that you can be in comfortably for at least 10 to 30 minutes. And again, this is something that can be worked up to, but of the positions I've shown, you should definitely have at least one that you can sit in comfortably for at least 10 minutes. You want it to be comfortable enough to not distract you, but not so comfortable that you can fall asleep. So like I said about Shavasana, yeah, that one's so comfortable you can tend to fall asleep, but you also don't want to be too uncomfortable, like forcing yourself into a lotus position just because you feel like it. You want the body to be comfortable, but not so comfortable that you'll fall asleep. You got to find, a happy balance. And then my recommendation for anyone who wants to find more comfort in seated meditative positions is to just spend more time in them. That's personally the best way to build up your tolerance to be sitting longer on the ground. That's how I built up my tolerance. So, most people spend a lot of the time seated in chairs, developing bad posture and tight hips, unless you're sitting in the chair how I just shown you to, sit in the chair for meditation. So spending just 30 minutes a day on the ground can open up your hips and help you correct hunched over posture. Add in some focused abdominal breathing and you have a trifecta of benefits for your practice. It's also important to note that a consistent yoga asana practice can benefit you greatly when it comes to seated postures. It is the reason they were created in the first place after all. So yeah, definitely coupling your meditation practice with a consistent physical yoga practice will always help you and benefit you when it comes to finding more ease and more comfortability in all of these meditation positions.